We'll call to order the Board of Zoning Appeals. Would you stand for the pledge to the flag? Keith, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Call roll, please.
Keith Bratcher.
Here.
Joe Crowell.
Here.
Jerry Sartain. Joe Machado.
Here.
Michael Rather. Jared Barrett.
Here.
Thane Cantrell.
Present.
All voting members are present. We do have a quorum, sir.
We have the minutes that were mailed out to you. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes as mailed out to us? Do we have a motion they be approved? Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. They are approved. We have one item of business tonight. This is a request by Ralph and Johnny Cook, who are requesting services, counseling services or therapy service for horses, but mainly addition of a barn and office space. So what do you have on that? And I think this was previously approved in 2005.
That's correct.
Operation out there.
Okay. Application 2012-4, filed by Ralph and Johnny Cook, as well as Lantern Lane Farms Incorporated, involves the property located at 6201 Corinth Road. It's a 16.9 acre site that's zoned residential 15. And they are seeking conditional use approval to amend a prior issued conditional use permit permitting equestrian activities to include counseling services using horses and other animals, the establishment of a retreat for rest and recovery, and construction of a barn containing office space in the R15 zone. Along with that, they are seeking variance relief to the total square footage for detached accessory structures, and that's for the 6,000 square foot portion of office space located within the barn. In 2005, with the issuance of 2005-46 conditional use permit number, they were permitted the use of horse boarding, riding lessons, shows, and allowed the construction of a second residence. As part of that approval, they also granted approval for variances for the relief of parking area materials, as well as the distance requirement that we have in place for fire hydrants. They received a variance for that because there was no fire hydrant located within 1,000 feet. And the utility provider in that area is Gladesville Utility District. They are seeking to expand the operation as well as the original conditional use was silent to the actual activities that were being proposed for the site, though the conversation that was held as part of the public hearing included the counseling and therapy services. They are wanting to expand the services to include animals other than horses, any type of farm animal that would be allowed on the site by right otherwise if it wasn't used as part of the business. They're proposing to erect a 220 by 95 barn that will be located on the site that will include a 6,000 square foot office space within it. And because of the office administrative area that's being proposed within the barn, that places it into the requirement of having to go through site plan review and demonstrate that it meets certain standards and that the site can accommodate that and stormwater won't be a problem. That will be a condition that we recommend, and it's also a requirement that's already in our code. The original conditional use, being that it didn't state all of the uses that were actually being permitted, we advertised it for those uses so that the amended conditional use can reflect what is actually taking place on the site. And there have been no complaints over the course of the last few years when they have been operating, and we did not receive any phone calls for after sending letters to the property owners, posting a sign on the site, or advertising in the paper. Other than that, we do not, because barns are permitted and they're exempt from any kind of zoning standard if it's a bona fide agricultural structure. What they're proposing, the applicant has supplied pictures for us, and I will show it to you. It can easily, if the use is being abandoned, the office space can easily be converted back to barn area. So we don't think that the erection of the structure at this particular site is going to deter adjacent properties from wanting to develop within the regulations that are established at the time. The tracts out in this area are large farm-like tracts, very spacious. And we posted the sign on the property. Surrounding properties, this is just some of the animals on the site and the other structures. The second residence that was permitted as part of the original conditional use is actually permitted by right, but the use of it being a retreat for rest and recovery is now being requested, or at least they want it to be represented in the conditional use permit. And the applicant, has supplied us photos of giving us an example of what they envision for the proposed structure. And so these are just examples. It's not the actual structure being proposed, but you can get an idea as to what it may look like. And it's not really uncommon to find structures that look like that on agricultural properties. And this is a site plan showing the existing structures, soil areas, driveways, topography of the site, as well as the proposed barn. They are proposing like living quarters for like a farmhand that will be attached to the barn, and that is also permitted by right through our accessory dwelling unit provisions. So that is not part of this request, but it will be constructed as part of all the overall improvements. And just to give you an idea, this is the aerial with the approximate location of the barn and the accessory dwelling unit. And that concludes our presentation.
Do we have anyone here representing this request? If you'll come around, please, give your name and any additional information you'd like to share about yourself with the board.
But please, the members of the board, Mr. Chairman, my name's George Dean. I'm an attorney from Nashville, and I'm here this afternoon representing the Cooks and Lantern Lane Farm. I think you've got kind of a pretty good overview from Danielle's description. This board approved the original project back in 2005, and although what really happened here is that they would like to raise some money to put up the barn. In looking at that, they asked my opinion about the previous order of the board, and when I saw it, it didn't really mention anything about the counseling activities on the site. And it just seemed to me that it was very worthwhile for us to come back, make sure that that was appropriate. And my understanding is that the original hearing it was discussed, it just didn't make its way into the board's order. So I thought it was best to come back to the board, ask the board to take a look at that, make sure that was okay, and also ask the board to amend the original application to allow the construction of the barn, and also the office space, and as Danielle mentioned, the additional farm animals. I don't know that the farm animals are a big deal since it's a property that is, at least in some ways, agricultural. So essentially, we're asking for the board to grant us permission to construct the barn. We understand that we'll have to go through, I take it, the Planning Commission for site plan review, and we understand that. I don't have any problem with that. I won't go into any detail and certainly would encourage any questions that you might have. I might have to ask Mr. and Ms. Cook to respond to some of them, but the thing I would like to emphasize is that you can see that the folks in the back here, Mr. and Mrs. Cook and their son Brandon, there's nobody here in opposition. They have tried, they've been operating out there 6 to 7 years, and they have tried to be good neighbors. The whole idea behind it's essentially operated by a nonprofit corporation, this Lantern Lane Farms. And the whole idea is to have a very gentle, relaxed atmosphere. It is not their intent in any way to disturb the neighbors. In fact, the whole premise of the operation is to help people who have difficulties, psychological, and be able to take care of them. And so that, it would be contradictory, really, for them to be operating something in a way that would cause problems for the neighbors. As far as I know, there's not been any complaints since they started operation 6 or 7 years ago. I specifically asked that Mr. and Mrs. Cook just go around to the neighbors and talk to the neighbors, make sure that there wasn't some difficulty or answer any questions that they might have. If there were any kinds of problems, let's sit down and take care of them. There were none. The neighbors have looked at it. They've become very comfortable with the operation out there. And as far as I know, no opposition. And again, there's nobody here today. And I think maybe that's the best. Most of the time, probably when the board looks at a conditional use permit, you're looking at a new activity and you don't know what the neighbors are how they're going to respond when it actually starts. Here's a situation where these folks have been there for 6 or 7 years. They've done an excellent job. They've kind of melded into the community and haven't caused any problems, haven't generated any kind of complaints. They're kind of part and parcel of the community at this point. We're glad to comply with any of the requirements that the staff has suggested. And if there are any questions, we'd be glad to respond to them. Yes, sir.
As I wait just a minute. As I looked at this application, I don't see a lot of change from what was approved in 2005. And you correct me if I'm wrong on this. I want to make sure that I understand this. You use a stronger word now, counseling. As I understood, it's more like therapy. You don't really counsel anyone, but this is a therapeutic type of operation.
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
And then also the addition of the barn in the office space.
That's exactly right.
Appears to me the big thing. Now,
yes,
whether this is an appropriate one or not, that's what we need to
yes,
decide here tonight.
Yes, sir.
I'm always glad to get an attorney to agree with me for once. Joe, you had a question.
I actually have several questions. I guess one is, how many clients would they possibly have? The maximum number of clients would they have on the property at one time?
Joni or Ralph, you're probably getting into operational. We probably need your expertise.
Come on around up to the microphone. Give us your name and
Ralph
for the record.
Cook, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I do counseling at the farm there now. As far as the number of people who would be there at one time, it's a little hard to say, but I only see one either an individual or sometimes a family together, which would be, mom and a dad and their children. We would probably have at the most at a time 4 or 5 therapists on site at the same time, but that would be pretty unusual to have that many. It's hard to say at this point in time because we are growing and expanding.
You say 4 or 5, maybe families or couples or whatever. You have these residents on site. How many of them would be staying in the different residents on the site?
There's only. When I see people, they don't necessarily stay on site. They just come in for an hour session. And then we do have the Sela house, the log house, which I don't know if you have a picture of or not, but that's where people sometimes will come and spend like a weekend or 2 or 3 days at a time. But and sometimes they're there for counseling, and sometimes just to be out in the country. Yeah, just.
Thank you.
Joe Crowell.
Sir, I got a few questions. You're saying there are only going to be 4 or 5 families at a time, or 4 or 5 people at a time?
It depends on the. Sometimes people will call and want me to work with their child, or the therapists who work with us with just the child himself, or it may be a whole family situation where we're working with the entire family.
Okay, how many square foot of office space are you going to have in this barn? 1,000 square feet office space? Oh, 6,000. How many people will be working in this office? That's a lot of office space. 6,000. How many people will be working in this office?
I'm not.
Come on around to the microphone for the record.
I'm kind of mixed up here.
For the record,
You're
give
going
us
to
your
have
name.
4 or 5 families here at a time, but you need 6,000 square feet.
Wait just a minute, Joe. Go ahead and give us your name for the record.
I'm sorry, my name is Joni Cook. I'm the operations manager for Lantern Lane Farm.
All right, Joe, continue.
Okay, you're going to have 6,000 square feet, but you're going to only have 4 or 5 families at a time. Who is going to work in this 6,000 square foot office space?
Right now, the home that you see toward the front there, that's where Ralph and I actually live.
We're talking about the 6,000 square foot office area.
Right, I'm getting to that. Just one second. The home that we're in right now, we're using 3 different spots in that home for counseling. So we're actually living in 2 rooms in that house. And we hope to move the offices out of that house into the barn. And that's actually where we do most of the therapy anyway, because it's connected with the horses. So our objective in having that much office space is so that we can move those offices out of the house into the barn.
We're still not getting my answer. How many people are going to be working? How many people?
Well, that's what he was saying, 4 to 5 counselors, and each counselor may have a family that they're working with at one time. So right now we don't have that many people that come all at once, but we want to be prepared for that.
Why do you need 6,000 square feet for 4 or 5 people?
There's offices, and there's 2 conference room areas, and there's a room to teach kids, because we want to have somewhere where we can be mentoring them as well.
Okay, thank you.
And that would also include a kitchen area so that we can use cooking as a part of the mentoring.
Jerry?
Well, I think where Joe is going is we went from understanding this to be like a mom and pop type of organization to you actually have employees, you have 4 or 5 counselors, and this is more of a business with a residence that happens to be there than it is a residence that happens to be a small business be there.
I think that's a fair thing to say, that it's many conditional use permits are really businesses. The idea, of course, is that they would blend into the residential neighborhood. Again, I'm not as familiar with the Rutherford County regulations, but back home in Nashville, you think of daycare centers and even one of the things that always gets me, I grew up on a farm, and the back home in Nashville, the people who grew up in the city think farming is kind of an idyllic kind of activity, and it is in a way, but they don't understand that it's a business too. You know, there's a lot of things that happen on a farm that sometimes aren't necessarily consistent with residential uses. So the idea here was we'd come to you all, let you all know what we're doing, and again, the fact that it's been there for a while not really generated a problem and seems very consistent with the residential use of the property, even though, as you say, you can certainly see it as a business activity. It pretty well melds with the residential nature of the community.
So including, somebody answers the phone, you got secretaries or whatever, how many people work there?
Right now, Ralph is a full-time counselor there. We have an intern always. We usually have MTSU students or Trevecca students that come as interns to the property that are also therapy, related. And then we also have another gentleman. So we have 3 right now, Ralph and the other gentleman, and he's working pretty much part-time as well, and then the intern. So we have a need for 3 offices right now. And that's what we have in our home.
Thank you.
And we don't have a secretary, I'm it.
Thank you. Keith?
Yeah, I just got a few questions. Allude to what their attorney had said in his statements there. A question for our staff. In 2005, when this was approved, what was it approved for? Do you have that? The reason I'm wanting to know that is to what we approved then, what's been going on, and what we're looking at right now.
Well, if you look at the first paragraph on the background of your staff report, I listed verbatim what the original conditional use indicated. But I also, in the pre-meeting, explained that often what really takes place during the public hearing wasn't necessarily expressed properly in the conditional use permits. It didn't reflect what the applicant was truly looking for, because they were trying to make it fit into a term that might already appear in the code. But it was part of the discussion according to the applicant. And the actual application, which I'm assuming you were receiving guidance from the staff at the time on how to fill the application out, indicated equestrian services, horse boarding, training lessons, and that's what the original conditional use permit states. So.
And that's what I recall that was approved at that time as well. I don't have it in front of me, obviously, but they've got it over at the office. But I do remember that the therapy was a part of that, and that we had approved at that time.
All right. A couple of questions. Along with the therapy you're going to be having going on and stuff, I seen here with the barn you're going to build, you're also going to have not only your own horses there, you're going to have facilities to be able to for other people to board their horses there.
I don't think that we're not doing that. I don't think that was a part of the original application and was approved by the board, but really they don't do that anymore. They're not.
Okay.
They're not.
So any horses and stuff you're going to have there just going to be for your that will belong to you and for your therapy sessions, not to have the public to come in and board horses there.
Right. And the board limited the number of their horses to 10 at the last meeting, and we're not asking for an increase on that at all.
And the total square footage. So in other words, I want to kind of, I guess, try to get to a number. So possibly what your husband said earlier, at the maximum could be 5 therapists and maybe 20, 25 people at the most, if they all had a family they were dealing with. That's correct. Okay, and one other question. And you only have one cabin or facility where someone would be there overnight? And at one time, how many people would you house that would stay overnight?
Therapy?
Or several days?
Well, the cabin only sleeps up to 8. There's bedding there for up to 8, and we've never allowed any more than that. We have had couples that have come with family, but it's never been more than 8.
All right, ma'am, thank you. That's all.
Any other questions?
2 years from now, how many people you think will be working out there? What's your future plans? 6,000 square foot's a lot of office space. I worked for a company in Mercersburg, didn't have that many people as office, didn't have that many square foot. In 2 years, what do you predict?
Like right now, we have just the 2 that are full-time, so our projection is to the 4 or 5. That's what we were projecting from 2 years,
Not
2
over
years
4 or
out.
5 counselors.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
We don't see it housing more than that.
Go.
Thank you.
If we added verbiage in here as to limit you to the number of counselors, you could have what would be a good educated guess for you.
Grounds at one time, because often the way counselors will, they sometimes, and I'm not saying this will be done here, but often what will happen is someone will say, you know what, I'm willing to do Monday, but I don't want to work the rest of the week.
Right.
So that's
why I'm being hesitant. I'm looking at one time. In other words, in your vision in the future, how many counselors might be there in any one given day?
I can't imagine that there would be more than 5, because I don't think I think it would take away from that peaceful atmosphere that we're trying to create.
You don't have a problem with us putting a verbiage in there to that effect?
Sounds very reasonable, frankly. I would understand the board wanting to do that.
As long as we're aware that there may be
Yeah, you may have 10 or 15 on the payroll, but
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yes,
But
yeah,
I'm talking
yeah.
about counseling sessions going on at one time. Okay?
Any other questions? Thank you. You may be seated. We'll open this for a public hearing for anyone who'd like to speak on this. Let the record show there's no one here to speak on it. We'll close the public hearing. Do we have a motion on it?
Motion be approved, Mr.
Have a
Chairman.
motion that be approved.
Second.
Have a second. Call the roll, please.
Wait a minute. I'd like to add something. Can we not? We can have verbiage in there about the number of counselors.
You can make a motion for an amendment.
Okay.
What we can do, Joe, is monitor this and see if there's any problems that arise on it. I don't see any, and I don't really see any reason for us to put any limitations on it at this point. And we will have our people that takes a look at it and report back to us, Joe.
What I'm concerned about is the 5 counselors now, no problem out there. But if they could just, 6,000 square foot of office space is a lot of office space. Down the road, they may have 100 or 200 people out there. That's what I'm concerned. If I was a neighbor in that area and there was 200 people driving automobiles up and down a small road, then I'd have a problem with it.
Yeah. Well, I bet they hope that they have that kind of business. I'm not sure that's going to take. I imagine they would come back to us if they had that kind of business to make sure that we had approval on it. I just really don't see that this is a big problem at this time. But you all are welcome to make a amendment to the motion. But I think I would prefer just see the motion like it is, like it's given to us. And then if we need to amend that at some point, we can come back and do that. There's no reason to rush into putting some limitations on that. But I think the limitations are going to be in the business world right now that they're not going to have 200 or 300 people coming out there or more than what they have stated already. I think that's going to cap itself without us worrying about that. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Call the roll, please.
Keith Bratcher,
Yes.
Joe Crowell,
Yes.
Joe Machado,
Yes.
Jerry Sartain,
Yes.
Thane Cantrell.
Yes.
Motion carries, sir.
It is approved. That's all we have tonight.
I would like to make an amendment, please, sir. I would like to amend that we limit them to no more than 5 counselors at one time.
You want to make a motion now? It's too late
Motion.
for an amendment to that. You want to make a motion
Motion to amend it.
that it limit 5.
5.
Okay. Do we have a second to that?
I'll second it, Mr. Chairman. That was my intention originally.
That is going to be a procedurally incorrect motion at this point. The motion was made. It's been voted upon. There's no mechanism for us to reconsider or revisit.
Well, what he's wanting to do is just making a motion after that, not an amendment. He can't amend it.
That's correct. I'm not aware of any, I'm not aware of any mechanism that we can revisit at this point.
Do you think it would be inappropriate to make an motion at this time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll abide by the attorney on that. Any other items? Any other discussion? We are adjourned. Thank you.